My daughter-in-law slapped me across the face. And in that split second, I realized my home was no longer mine. That's the memory that keeps replaying in my head, over and over again like a broken record that won't stop. The sting on my cheek faded days ago, but the ache in my heart, it's still there. You know, I never imagined I'd live to see a day when the girl I once welcomed with open arms would raise her hand against me, not in my wildest dreams. I remember her first day in our home, how small her voice was when she said, "Thank you for accepting me, Mama." I had smiled back and said, "You're part of the family now, my child." If only I knew then that one day, that same girl would look me dead in the eye and demand the keys to my house like I was some stranger. But before I tell you how we got there, I should start from the beginning. I live in a quiet neighborhood in South Carolina, the kind where everyone waves from their porches, and you can smell biscuits baking on Sunday mornings. My husband, Robert, passed away 8 years ago. Cancer. Slow, painful. He was my rock, my voice of reason when emotions ran high. After he passed, the house felt too big, too quiet. Every sound echoed: the ticking clock in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator, even my own footsteps down the hall. But my son, Daniel, he made sure I was never truly alone. He'd visit almost every evening after work, bringing groceries, sometimes dinner, sometimes just his company. Brewery, he's my only child, my pride and joy. You know the kind of boy mothers dream about? Kind, responsible, never forgot to call, never raised his voice. Even when he was a little boy, he'd hug me after school and whisper, "I love you, Mama." So when Daniel told me he'd met someone, a woman named Ava, I was nothing but happy for him. I still remember that Sunday dinner. He sat across from me, his eyes glowing in that way a man looks when he's truly in love. "Mama," he said, cutting into his chicken nervously, "I think you're gonna like her." Ibra and I did. Or at least I wanted to. Ava walked into our lives like springtime, bright, young, full of life. She had this way of making everyone feel small and important at the same time. She'd compliment my cooking, call me Mom after just 2 weeks, and always wore that same jasmine perfume. I'll never forget that scent. It still lingers in the hallway sometimes. Ibra, at first, everything was good. Too good, maybe. When they got married, I cried tears of joy. I remember holding Daniel's arm at the church, whispering, "You take care of her, son." He smiled and said, "Always." After the wedding, they moved into a small apartment nearby. Life went on peacefully. I had my garden, my church, and my bridge club on Thursdays. Daniel called every night before bed. And Ava, she'd stop by sometimes with muffins or flowers, chatting about her job or their future plans. I used to tell my friends at church how blessed I was, how kind my daughter-in-law was, how lucky I felt that she treated me like a mother, not a burden. Hibrahra, but blessings. Sometimes they turn into lessons. It started small. Little things. Abri, a missed call from Daniel here. A short visit there, the way Ava would interrupt me mid-sentence at family dinners, or how she'd roll her eyes when I talked about the past. I brushed it off. Thought maybe I was being sensitive. Abra, she was young, maybe just learning her place in the family. But then, Daniel started changing too. Abrahir, he'd show up quiet, distant, like something was weighing on his mind. When I'd ask, he'd smile that tired smile and say, "Just work, Mama, long hours." Abra, but mothers know. Abra, we always know. Sometimes I'd catch a look between them, a cold, silent exchange, and I'd wonder what was going on. I still remember one evening clearly. I was sitting in the living room folding laundry when Ava came by alone. Abra, she didn't knock, just walked right in, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "Abrik!" "Oh, Ava, you scared me." Placing a folded towel on the couch. Ibri, she didn't S&M. "I'll back." She looked around the house like she was inspecting it. "Daniel says this place is too big for you," she said casually, running her finger along the mantel. "He worries about you living here all alone." "Bro," I nodded. "He's a good son, always worrying about his mama." She tilted her head, that little smirk tugging at her lips. "Maybe one day we could move in, help you around." "Bro," I paused. There was something in her tone I couldn't quite read, part sweetness, part something else. Brooke. Oh, that's kind of you, I said softly. But I'm doing just fine here, honey. Bree. She smiled again, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. When she left, I sat in the quiet for a long time, the scent of jasmine lingering behind her. And for the first time in years, the house didn't feel peaceful. It felt watched. Brewer. I didn't tell Daniel about that conversation. I didn't want to seem paranoid. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was just lonely. But a mother's heart? It can sense when a storm is coming. And that storm, as I'd soon learn, had already started brewing right inside my own home. It was a Thursday evening when I first felt it, that strange heaviness in the air. You ever walk into your own home and feel like something's different? Like the walls themselves are holding a secret? Daniel had called that morning, said he'd stop by after work. I made his favorite chicken pot pie, extra thyme, just the way he liked it. I even set the table with the good dishes Robert and I used to save for special occasions. But when the clock hit 7:30, then 8, then 8:45, there was still no knock on the door. Brooker, I called him twice. No answer. Texted him once, dinner's getting cold, sweetheart. Bree, no reply. Bree. Finally, around 9:15, headlights swept across the front window. Relief flooded my chest, but when I opened the door, it wasn't Daniel standing there. Brewer, it was Ava. Brewer, she looked flawless, as always. Not a single hair out of place, lipstick perfect, perfume sharp enough to sting the air. Brooke, oh, I said, surprised. I thought Daniel was coming. Sent me, her smile was thin. He's busy, sent me instead. Something about that didn't sit right. My son never sent anyone. He came himself. Always. I stepped aside politely. Well, come in then. She walked in like she owned the place, her eyes drifting over every corner of the living room, the family photos, the furniture, even the small scratch on the old coffee table. Smells good, she said finally, eyeing the pie cooling on the counter. Brooke chicken pot pie, I replied, forcing a smile. Daniel's favorite. Brooke, I know, she said, her tone unreadable. He mentioned you used to make it every Sunday for your husband. That word used to cut through the room like a knife. Brooke, we sat down and I tried to fill the silence with small talk. The weather, her job, church events. She nodded politely but kept glancing toward the hallway where Robert's old study was. Then, just as I was about to pour her some tea, she asked something that made my hands tremble. So, Mama, she began slowly, have you thought about what'll happen to the house, in the future? Brooke, I looked up, startled. What do you mean, sweetheart? Brooke. Oh, nothing bad, she said quickly, waving her hand. It's a big place for one person. Daniel worries about you, that's all. Brewer. I set the teapot down carefully, trying not to show the unease creeping up my spine. Well, your husband was raised in this house. Every corner of it has his childhood in it. I'm not ready to leave just yet. She smiled faintly, sipping her tea. Of course not. I was just thinking, if one day you wanted to downsize, we could help manage things for you. Abracadabra manage? I repeated softly. Her eyes flickered up. Yes, like the property, the finances. It's just a lot for someone your age. Brewer for someone my age. The words hit like a quiet insult wrapped in sugar. Brooke. I smiled tightly and changed the subject, but inside a seed of doubt took root. Brewer. That night, when she left, I noticed something odd. One of the kitchen drawers, the one where I kept important purse and small cash, was slightly open. I was certain I hadn't left it that way. Brooke. I checked inside. Nothing missing, just moved around. I stood there under the kitchen light for a long moment, staring at that open drawer, my pulse drumming in my ears. Then I laughed to myself, feeling foolish. Maybe I'd been careless, maybe I was seeing things, but the next few weeks only deepened that uneasy feeling. Brower Daniel's calls grew shorter, his visits rarer. When he did come by, Ava was always with him, her hand on his arm, her smile tight. She'd start answering for him, finishing his sentences, deflecting his questions about my health or bills. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch, I tried to speak with Daniel alone. "Abraki Ava, could you get us some lemonade?" I asked politely. Her eyes narrowed just a flicker, but she stood, brushing invisible lint from her skirt. When she went inside, I leaned toward my son. "Abraki, Danny, is everything okay? You seem tired lately." "Abra," he rubbed his eyes, sighed. "It's just work, Mama." "Brooke." I touched his hand gently. "You can tell me if something's wrong. I'll always be here for you." He smiled, but it was small, fragile. "I know, Mama." "Abri, then." Before I could ask more, Ava came back empty-handed. "I couldn't find the sugar," she said flatly. That night, after they left, I found the sugar bowl sitting right there on the counter where it always was. Berkey little things, always little things. A week later, I went to the mailbox and found a letter from the bank addressed to Daniel at my address. I frowned, turning it over in my hands. Why would his mail come here? I set it aside and told myself I'd give it to him next time he came over. But when that next time came, he looked startled when I handed it to him. "Aber, how'd this get here?" he asked, his voice too quick. "I was hoping you could tell me," I said softly. Ava stepped forward before he could answer, snatched the envelope, and said with a sharp smile, "Probably a mistake. We've been updating addresses, right, honey?" He hesitated. "Right." "Aber," I nodded, but my heart sank a little deeper. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea, staring at the window's reflection, my own tired eyes looking back. Robert. The house felt heavy again. Robert's old clock ticked louder than usual. Ibrahim and I thought, maybe it's not loneliness I'm feeling anymore. Maybe it's warning, because deep down I knew something was coming. Ibrahim, and it had my son's name written all over it. The discovery came on a Saturday morning, the kind of morning that starts quiet but ends with a scream you never saw coming. I was watering the azaleas in the front yard when I saw Daniel's car pull up. For a second, I smiled. I hadn't seen him in nearly 2 weeks. But as he stepped out, my heart sank. He looked thinner, worn. His eyes darted toward the house like he was bracing for something. Ibrahim and Ava was right behind him, sunglasses on, arms folded, that same jasmine scent trailing behind her. "Good morning, Mama," Daniel said, forcing a smile. "Morning, sweetheart." I wiped my hands on my apron. "What brings you two by so early?" Ava's tone was clipped. "We just need to talk." 3 simple words, but they landed heavy. Abru. We sat in the living room, the same room where I'd once rocked my baby boy to sleep. Now it felt colder, smaller. Ava sat straight-backed on the couch, Daniel beside her, silent. I could hear the ticking of Robert's old clock. Tick, tick, tick. Finally, Daniel took a deep breath. "Mama," he began softly, "we've been thinking about the house." My chest tightened. "The house?" He nodded. "You've got more space than need. Well, we're planning to start a family soon. It'd be nice to have more room." I stared at him, trying to read his face. He wasn't smiling. His hands were shaking. "I see," I said slowly. "So what are you suggesting?" Ava leaned forward, her tone syrupy but sharp. "We could move in here, Mama, help take care of you. You wouldn't have to live alone anymore. Help take care of me." Those words were dressed like kindness, but their shoes were made of greed. I smiled faintly. "That's a sweet thought, but I'm doing just fine here. You two should focus on your own home." Daniel looked down at his hands. Ava exhaled loudly as if she'd expected that answer. "Well," she said after a pause, "we were hoping you'd consider signing the house over to us, just to make things easier in the future legally, you know." I froze. "Sign it over?" "Yes," she said quickly. "We'd make sure you're still taken care of. You'd always have your room, of course. It's just It's just a house," Daniel interrupted quietly. But I could hear the guilt in his voice. "No, son," I said softly. "It's not just a house. It's your father's legacy. It's the walls that raised you." Ava rolled her eyes slightly, then caught herself and smiled. "Of course, Mama. We respect that. We're just trying to plan ahead, that's all." She reached into her purse and pulled out a few papers, placing them on the coffee table. Abercrombie legal documents. Property transfer forms, Abercrombie. I didn't touch them. I just stared. Abercrombie, you brought these with you? I asked quietly. Her voice didn't waver. Daniel thought it might make the process easier. Daniel swallowed hard. Mama, it's not what it looks like. We just wanted to take my house while I'm still breathing. The room went silent. Even the clock seemed to stop. I saw a flicker of shame cross Daniel's face, but Ava's expression didn't change. I think you're being dramatic, she said coolly. This is for everyone's benefit. You don't have to worry about bills, repairs, taxes, Burke. I don't worry about them, I cut in, because I handle them myself. She stood then, her perfume slicing through the air. You're being unreasonable. You should be grateful someone's trying to help you. He help me? I said, my voice trembling now. By stealing the roof over my head? Daniel looked torn, glancing between us like a man caught in two worlds. Mama, please! It's not like that! I turned to him, my heart breaking right there in front of me. Then what is it, Daniel? Tell me what it is like, because right now it feels like I raised a son who'd sell his mother for a bigger bedroom. He flinched, his eyes wet, but he said nothing at all. That silence, it was louder than any argument. Ava gathered the papers, shoving them back into her purse. We'll come back when you've had time to think clearly, she said coldly. Then she turned and walked toward the door. Daniel hesitated. Mama? I looked away. Go on, son, follow your wife. He stood there for a second, torn apart, then walked out after her. The door closed softly behind them. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the spot where they'd been sitting. The late morning light filtered through the lace curtains, touching the framed wedding photo on the mantel. Daniel and Ava, smiling, radiant. I got up and turned that photo face down. And then I cried. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind that leaves your throat dry and your chest hollow. Later that evening, I made myself some tea, but it tasted like dust. Every sound in the house seemed sharper: the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the wind pushing against the window pane. I felt Robert's absence stronger than ever. He would have known what to do. He would have spoken sense into Daniel. But all I had was my own aching heart and a sinking feeling that this wasn't over. And I was right, because 2 weeks later, alone. And that's when everything broke. It was a hot afternoon. I was in the backyard hanging laundry when I heard the front door open. I didn't even hear her car pull up. When I stepped inside, she was standing in the hallway holding my spare key. How did you? I began. Oh. She smiled. Daniel gave it to me. Brock. She brushed past me like she belonged there, walking straight to the living room. I told you before, she said coolly. This house is too much for you. We're moving in whether you like it or not. I felt my breath catch. You can't just walk in here and and that's when she did. The slap. It came so fast I didn't even see it coming, just the sound, sharp and awful, echoing through the quiet house. I stood frozen. The sting burned my skin. She leaned in close, her voice like ice. Give me the keys, old woman. And in that moment, something inside me broke. Not from pain, from disbelief. That a girl I'd once called daughter could look me in the eye and treat me like a trespasser in my own home. I didn't give her the keys. But I knew if I didn't act soon, I might lose everything anyway. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, the flash of anger, the cold in her voice, the way her hand had cut through the air like it had a right to. I sat in the dark living room, the lamp off, just the pale light from the street filtering through the curtains. My cheeks still throbbed faintly, but that wasn't the pain keeping me awake. It was the betrayal, that kind of deep ache that doesn't sit in the body, it sits in the soul. I kept replaying her words. Give me the keys. She said it like she already owned the house, like I was some squatter in my own home. Around 3 a.m. I got up and went to Robert's old study. Brr, the air smelled like old paper and cedar wood. His jacket was still hanging on the back of the chair, the one he used to wear when we'd sit on the porch, talking about nothing and everything. Broke, I touched the fabric lightly. Robert, I whispered into the quiet. What would you do? Brr. He wouldn't have let them walk all over me. He'd have known how to make things right without shouting, without losing dignity. That's how he always handled trouble, quietly, smartly. So I decided to do the same. Hey, bro. Morning, I drove to the county office. My hands trembled the whole way. I hadn't been there in years, not since we'd registered Robert's will. Burke. I sat with a kind clerk named Mrs. Whitfield, who looked like the kind of woman who'd seen it all and knew when not to ask questions. I just need to verify that my property deed is still in my name, I told her. She typed a few things into her computer, her nails clacking gently on the keyboard. Burke, let's see here. Yes, Mrs. Parker. The property is still solely under your ownership. Burke, relief washed over me, but only for a moment. Then she added, although there was an inquiry made last month about transferring it. Burke, I froze. An inquiry? By who? She checked the record. Abraker, I felt my blood run cold. Bert, did she file anything official? Bertie. Mrs. Whitfield shook her head. No, just asked what documents would be needed if the owner decided to transfer ownership voluntarily. I thanked her and walked out with shaking hands. Ebrew. Outside, the sky was gray, heavy with rain. I sat in the car for a long while, just staring out the windshield. That woman hadn't just thought about taking my house, she'd already started planning how to. Bro, I wasn't angry anymore. I was determined. Brew, that evening I called Daniel. He picked up after a few rings. His voice was tired. Hey, Mama. Daniel, I said softly, I need to see you. Alone. Aberfer. He hesitated. Ava's Aberker alone, I repeated. Please. There was silence on the line, then a quiet, okay. Tomorrow evening. When he came by, he looked like a boy again, lost, confused, ashamed. His eyes darted toward the living room, like he was expecting her to be lurking in the shadows. I made him tea, the way I always did when he was little. Honey, no sugar. He sat down, hands clasped, not saying a word. Daniel, I began gently, how long has Ava been talking about this house? Hebrew. He looked up sharply. Mama, Hebrew, don't lie to me, son, please. He swallowed hard. A few months. I nodded, my chest tightening. And you knew she wanted it signed over to her? He nodded again, barely whispering. Why? I asked quietly. Why would you let her talk you into something like that? His voice broke. She said it was for our future. She said she wanted to make sure everything was secure, that you'd be okay when you got older. I looked at him for a long moment. And you believed her? He dropped his face into his hands. I didn't know what to believe anymore. She's been saying you're not well, that you forget things, that maybe it's time to plan ahead. I persist. I felt my stomach twist. Forget things? Me? That's how she was doing it. Slowly, cleverly making me look fragile, unstable. Berkey, Daniel, I said softly, look at me. He raised his eyes, and I dreamed there. You've lost my mama. No mother would have wanted his home handed away like a used toy. No. Then you listen to me, son. You need to wake up. Woman takes everything from you and from me. He sat there in silence, guilt and confusion warring on his face. Then, like a dam breaking, he whispered, she said she was doing it for us. I thought she just wanted to help. I reached across the table and took his hand. That woman doesn't want to help anyone but herself. We sat there quietly for a long time, the only sound the soft clink of the spoon in my teacup. When he finally spoke again, his voice was small. What should I do, Mama? Protect what's yours and what's left of your father's name, I said, because I'm going to protect mine. That night I called my lawyer, an old friend of Robert's. We met the next morning, and by noon I'd added something new to my will. A. Brewer. I wasn't leaving the house to Daniel anymore. Not directly. It would go into a trust, one that couldn't be sold, transferred, or signed away without my written consent. It broke my heart to do it. But love doesn't mean blind trust. Ibrahri. When I got home, I changed the locks, every single one. That evening, when Ava showed up, because of course she did, she found her key useless. Ibrahri, she banged on the door like a storm. "Open up, Margaret! I know you're in there!" I stood behind the curtain, watching her through the narrow slit, my heart pounding but steady. She shouted for a while, her voice rising, desperate. Then finally she stopped, and in the silence that followed, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. "Aber," I didn't open the door. "Aber," I didn't yell back. I just whispered to my time. "Aber, she," but I knew Ava wasn't the kind of woman to give up easily. "Aber, see," and I was right. Because the very next week she made sure everyone in town knew her version of the story. She, and that's when the battle went public. Word travels fast in small towns, faster than wind, faster than reason. By the end of that week, I could feel the eyes on me at church. Soft whispers behind hymnals, the kind that stop when you turn your head. Eber, I didn't have to guess where it started. Brurksh, Alva. The story she spun was perfect, polished, pitiful. Poor young couple just trying to help an aging mother who'd lost her grip on reality. Poor woman confused about her own finances, lashing out, changing locks on her own family. She painted herself as the saint, the caregiver. Ibrahim and me, the bitter old woman, paranoid, selfish, ungrateful. For a while I stayed quiet. Sometimes silence is the only shield a person has. Ibri. But then I saw what it was doing to Daniel. He came by one Sunday morning. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, his shirt wrinkled, eyes red, voice tired. "They're talking about you, Mama," he said softly. "Ibri, I know," I answered, folding the dish towel in my lap. "She said you're sick," he whispered. "That you've been forgetting things, that you locked her out for no reason." "Bruh," I met his eyes. "And do you believe that?" He hesitated just for a second, but that second cut deep. "Son," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "you've known me your whole life. Have I ever been the kind of woman who forgets her own truth?" He didn't answer. He just stared at the floor like a boy again, lost, ashamed, torn between loyalty and love. I realized then that Ava wasn't just after my house. She was after my relationship with my son, the one thing I had left that was pure and unshaken. Ibro, and she almost won. Ibrower almost. That after Jenkins came by. Aberker. He's been at our church for 30 years, kind man always. Smelling faintly of coffee and peppermint. He sat down in my living room, hat in hand, eyes full of quiet concern. "Margaret," he said, "I've been hearing things. About the house, about Ava, Ebricha." I nodded. "So have I." Hebreshi, he sighed. "Would you like to tell me what's really going on?" Aberk. I took a deep breath and told him everything from the first conversation about downsizing to the slap that still echoed in my mind. Hebreshi, he listened without interrupting, his brow furrowing deeper as I spoke. When I finished, he leaned forward, his voice soft but steady. "Aberfi, you don't deserve any of that. And you're not crazy, Margaret. That girl's just greedy." For the way he said it so simply, so plainly, it was like permission to stop doubting myself. He promised to pray for me, but I knew prayer alone wouldn't stop Ava's mouth. So I decided to do something she didn't expect. I told the truth out loud. Bro. The next Sunday, I went to church early. The air smelled of pine and old wood polish. I sat in the front pew, hands folded, waiting. When Pastor Jenkins invited the congregation to share personal reflections, I stood up. Burke. Everyone turned. You could have heard a pin drop. Aber. I cleared my throat, my voice shaking only a little. "I just want to say," I began, "that sometimes the stories you hear about people aren't the whole truth." A few murmurs rippled through the room. I saw Ava's friends glance at each other from the back row. "I may be old," I said, "but I'm not confused. And I'm not unkind." What I am is a woman trying to hold on to the home she built with her husband, a home full of memories, not money. I looked straight at the faces I'd known for decades. I never asked anyone for help, but someone I trusted tried to take from me what wasn't theirs to take. Brr, the room went still. Brr, and that was enough. I didn't need to name names. Brr, the truth has a way of finding its way into the right ears. When I sat back down, I felt the faintest touch on my shoulder. Brr, it was Mrs. Cooper from down the street, 82 years old, cane in hand. She whispered, "Good for you, honey." That small gesture meant more than 1,000 words. Brr. 2 days later, the town's quiet sympathy began to shift. A neighbor told me she'd seen Ava arguing loudly with Daniel outside their apartment, her face red, arms flailing. Another friend mentioned seeing her at the courthouse again, talking to a clerk about transfer forms. Brr. But this time, Mrs. Whitfield, bless her heart, had already flagged my file for unauthorized inquiries. So when Ava tried to make her move, she ran into a legal brick wall. Brr. That's when Daniel finally saw it, really saw it. He showed up at my door late one evening, rain dripping from his jacket. Brooke, Mama, he said, his voice cracking. You were right. He told me everything, how Ava had lied about our conversations, about the slap, about her plans to sell the house once it was in her name. Brr, how she'd even called a realtor behind his back. When he confronted her, she didn't deny it. She told him he was too blind to see the opportunity, that she'd wasted her youth waiting for an inheritance that should have been hers already. Daniel said she packed her things that same night and left not even a goodbye. Bark. I listened in silence. When he finished, he looked at me, guilt written all over his face. Burke, I'm so sorry, Mama, he whispered. I reached across and took his hand. You don't owe me sorry, son. You just needed to see the truth for yourself. He nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. We sat like that for a long while, mother and son, the air heavy with forgiveness and a little bit of sadness. Outside, the rain kept falling, soft and steady, and for the first time in months, the house felt warm again. Of course, the gossip didn't end overnight. It never does. But slowly, people started to see. They noticed who showed up to church alone. Who stopped coming to town gatherings, who was suddenly too busy for friendly conversation. Hava vanished quietly from the community she'd once tried to charm. And I found peace in the Kio. Again. Kibri. I didn't need to win. I just needed to keep what was mine, my dignity, my home, and my truth. They say peace doesn't come all at once. It comes in small pieces, a little each day, like the slow light of dawn creeping through the cracks after a long night. For me, peace started with a cup of tea. That first morning after Daniel told me everything, I woke up early. The sky outside was pale blue, birds chattering in the oak tree outside my kitchen window. I brewed my tea chamomile, just like Robert used to make, and sat in my old rocking chair by the window. The house was quiet again. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt mine. I watched the light crawl across the living room floor, touching the family photographs that lined the mantel. There was Robert in his army uniform, smiling like he knew the world would be okay. There was Daniel as a little boy, holding a toy truck with dirt on his cheeks. And there was our last family picture, the one from the Christmas before Robert passed. For the first time in a long time, I didn't cry when I looked at it. I just smiled. Maybe that's what healing really is, when the same memories that once broke your heart start to make you grateful again. Over the next few weeks, Daniel came by often. At first, he'd come quiet, carrying guilt in his eyes. He'd bring groceries, things that didn't need fixing, linger longer than usual before leaving. But I didn't want guilt between us. Guilt keeps love from breathing. So one afternoon, while he was tightening a loose doorknob, I said softly, "Son, I forgive you." He froze, looked at me like a child hearing mercy for the first time. "I know you didn't mean to hurt me," I said. You just wanted to believe the woman you loved. Heemburg. He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. I don't deserve it, Mama. None of us ever do, I said with a little smile. That's why forgiveness is a gift, not a trade. From that day on, something changed in him. Abri started laughing again, calling me Mama the way he used to, soft, full of warmth. Sometimes he'd sit on the porch steps while I tended my garden, talking about small things, work, the weather, the neighbor's new dog. Abri. It wasn't much, but it was everything. A few months later, I decided to make a change. I didn't sell the house. Oh no, that home held my roots too deep. But I did open it not to anyone who wanted to take, but to those who needed to feel safe. On Saturdays, I started hosting what I called my tea porch mornings. Just an open invitation for women from church, widows, and even young mothers who needed a listening ear. We'd sit out there with lemon biscuits and mismatched teacups, talking about life, our mistakes, our fears, our tiny victories. And sometimes, in those soft, honest hours, I'd see pieces of myself in their stories. Ibra. It's funny, isn't it? How pain connects us more deeply than comfort ever could. One morning, a woman named Denise, newly divorced, heartbroken, trying to start over, looked at me and said, "How did you survive it all, Margaret? The betrayal, the loneliness, the humiliation?" I smiled, stirring my tea slowly. Ibrfi. You don't survive it all at once, I said. You survive it one truth at a time. As the seasons turned, the house bloomed again. The garden that once wilted under neglect was alive, hydrangeas bursting blue by the fence, lilies bright against the porch. The laughter of friends filled the rooms where silence used to sit heavy. Even my old cat, Missy, seemed happier, stretching out in sunbeams like a queen. Hebrew, but the biggest change wasn't in the house. It was in me. I learned that strength doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it's quiet, sitting still when someone tries to shake your peace, choosing grace when anger would be easier. And forgiveness. Real forgiveness isn't saying what you did was okay. It's saying, you no longer have power over me. That's the lesson Ava left behind. Ibrahim, not through her cruelty, but through what it taught me about myself. I never saw her again after that knee. I heard, through whispers, that she moved to another town, started working in real estate. Maybe she found what she was looking for. Maybe she didn't. Either way, she's no longer part of my story, at least not the part I'm still writing. Sometimes, late at night, I sit on my porch and talk to Robert just in my head, like I always used to. Ibrahim, I did it, love, I whisper. I kept our home. I kept our son. And I didn't lose myself in the fire. The wind always seems to answer softly through the trees, like he's saying, I knew you would. Last Sunday, after church, Daniel came up to me with a smile I hadn't seen in years. Abrika Mama, he said, I met someone. My heart skipped. He said quickly, almost nervously, and she reminds me of you, strong but gentle. I smiled and placed my hand over his. Then that's a good start. Ibrahim, we both laughed, and for the first time I didn't feel afraid of what came next. Ibrahim, because now I knew I could lose everything and still be whole. Later that evening, as the sun melted gold over the porch, I sat with my cup of tea, the world quiet and kind again. I thought about how fragile a mother's heart is, how it can be bruised, broken, betrayed, and yet still find a way to keep beating, still find the strength to love again. And that's when I realized, Ki Burka, peace isn't the absence of pain. Ibruf, it's the presence of understanding. My daughter-in-law demanded the keys to my house, and when I refused, she slapped me. It's how my story began, but that's not where it ends. It ends here in the same house she tried to take, in the same heart she tried to break, still standing, still warm, still full of love. Because no one can take your home when you've already made peace inside it,